So I moved in with two girls. Yeah, geez, dating game guy. Kim and Darlene, 2-bedroom. Okay, how's this going to work? 2-bedroom. And they had a friend who had just split up with her. It's just kind of timely, I guess. She just split up with her husband, Freddie Moore of the New Cats. Her name was Demi Moore. Okay, it's Demi, not Demi, Demi. It still bothers me to this day that people don't know her, they call her Demi. But Demi was kind of sort of living with us at the same time. Demi Moore split up with Freddie. And between her and Kim, smoking cigarettes, driving me crazy, okay? And I would yell. At that point, Demi had been on the cover of We magazine, and that was OUI. Hugh Hefner, because Penthouse had come out with a very glossy magazine called Penthouse. It was the first time that anybody had attempted to break into Hefner's Playboy, you know, because there were Playboy clubs. You're too young to remember, but there were Playboy clubs in every major city in America. And Playboy was just this huge enterprise. So, yeah, Penthouse moved in, and then Hustler started. And yeah, that thing. Anyway, so Hefner, to combat that, he came up with We magazine. It lasted less than a year, but Demi got a headshot on the cover of We. So that was the start of her career, as it were. And I had to make some money. Dad wouldn't give me any money. He said, you know, I said, Dad, there's no TV, there's no work. And he said, well, there are ditches out there. You can always dig ditches, right? Dad's not that mean, but you know, he really wanted me to come back and take over the reins. So I went back to New Jersey for 1 week and maybe 2. And I worked for him. Luckily, kind of, Demi had an interview out in New York. And so I met up with her in New York, and I took her to New Jersey, to Angua Cliffs, and showed her all the cliffs I was telling you about that I grew up with, because she had never seen anything. And the view of Manhattan, it was just overwhelming. My mom reminded me, I also took her home, and my dad was like in love with her, and it was a long story, but she was very nice. And we went back to LA. You know, after a couple of weeks working for my dad, I said, I'll find something in LA. And I went back, and I don't know how this happened, you know, but somehow this guy, Merrill Heater, who had heard of a company called Heater Quigley, who had done Hollywood Squares and Gambit, somebody had given him my name. Now, I didn't have a pot to piss in. I don't know if people use that expression anymore. It means you're broke. And Merrill was going to do a game show called Malcolm. It was a pilot, and he wanted me to produce it. Now, I had only produced Dating Game, and you know, I didn't know about budgets. I didn't know how to put together a crew, but Merrill didn't need that. Merrill just asked me, and again, just living in barely a bedroom, to write some sample questions, which I did, and I still have that typewriter. Never lost it. So I wrote some sample questions. I didn't think they were very good. I mailed them to him. I didn't think I had met him yet. And he liked him, and we got together. And for some reason, God bless him, Merrill, he hired me as associate producer of the show. Now, Merrill was the executive producer, but Merrill was always kind of a hands-off guy. I'm trying to think, it was like My Favorite Year, sort of an odd reference, but there was a producer in the movie My Favorite Year that would whisper to another producer, and that producer would be the mouth of the executive producer. And that's the kind of way it was with Merrill. Merrill would say, go up, tell that person he's telling the joke poorly. And then I would go. Anyway, Malcolm was a show. It's on YouTube, which, you know, who was I to criticize? It was at NBC, and I'd never worked at NBC before. And it was a show where this animated character named Malcolm was a wise guy, and he would ask questions that had 2-part answers. And it was up to the contestants. There were 3 contestants, where one contestant would buzz in, and they would give the first word of the answer, and another contestant would give the second part of the answer. But they would only get points if the 2 of them got the right answer. You know, if it's who is the first president of the United States? First guy says George, and you say Jefferson. Say no. That's the Jeffersons. It was George Washington. Oh, sorry, you didn't get any points. Anyway, he needed a host for the show. Alex Trebek and he had just done a show called Battlestars in, I guess it was 80 or 81. And I'm trying to think years.
Malcolm would have been 82 when it came out.
Yeah. You know what I'm doing? I'm jumping over freeze frame.
Yeah.
I'm going to backtrack for a second. I totally forgot this. I'm jumping too fast. Okay. Forgive me. Before Merrill called, Pat Davis, who ran the case, I'll do this real fast. Pat Davis and I created a show called Freeze Frame, which I got Jack Clark to host. And I had never created a show before, but I love movies, as I've told you. And I made a deal with RKO to use movie clips. And the show, while it wasn't a disaster, I put 5 rounds in a 22-minute show. You can't put 5 rounds in a 22-minute show. They're like 2.5 minutes. Anyway, I sold the show. Again, Jack Clark, who's terrific, made the show work, and I got through it under budget, and it was sold to another guy who had produced all of the Richard Simmons shows. He had syndicated the Richard Simmons show, which was a hugely popular show, and he bought the rights to the show. I had to go along with it. This is before Merrill, and he renamed the show Flash Frame. I said, that's not a name of a show. It's not even, those two words don't go together. Freeze frame. See, because you're freezing the clip. You're freeze framing the clip. Anyway, make a long story short, I had to do Flash Frame, and I went to Bob Eubanks, and I said, Bob, you got to do me a favor. I got to crank out 5 of these shows. We'll make you a deal. We'll shoot 5 shows in one day. I'll pay you this, okay? No pilot. We'll just do it. We'll get the hell out of it. I'm contractually locked in. Bob did the 5 shows. I hated him. He probably did too. It's on YouTube, or one of them are, and that was Freeze Frame and Flash Frame. It was my first time working with Pat Davis, who was a terrific guy, who had worked on the Donnie Marie show and the Mandrell shows. Forgive me for jumping around. Okay, so back to Merrill Heater. Malcolm. So I had done that, but and that's why that got me through 80 and 81, and
talking at you need a host for Malcolm, and Alex and Merrill had worked together on the original Battlestars.
Right, yeah, in 82 or 83, because again, between Freeze Frame and Flash Frame, that lasted about 1.5 years. Forgive me, again, we're going back 30 some odd years, so I don't have any notes here, and the memory is gone. Yeah, I had never interviewed hosts before, so luckily, anytime you put that word out, and if you're Merrill Heater, Hollywood Squares, Gambit, all these successful, I had tons of hosts, many of whom I knew, many of whom I didn't. But this was supposed to be a comedy show, and Malcolm was a comedic character. And the way Malcolm was created for television was he was set inside of an actual television set. Okay, and again, this is the days of TV sets, not flat screens, but the big, giant, clunky TV sets. And the only way we could introduce Malcolm on the show, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, was by putting him on a big pedestal and rolling the pedestal out with a giant TV set on it, okay? Which even the best of directors, shooting another TV set is not a great look. But Merrill wanted it. Who am I to argue? So I interviewed a bunch of hosts. I rented a place called the Debbie Reynolds Studio. Debbie was kind of in between movies, and she had bought a studio, a dance studio in the Valley. And I did a ton of interviews with, you name it, soap stars, well-known game show hosts, everybody from Jamie Farr to Fred Travellina. I interviewed, you remember George Fenneman? He was on You Bet Your Life with Groucho Marx. He was the announcer. for You Bet Your Life. I had interviewed him for all he did. I mean, he set up Groucho for Groucho's lines, but I was a big fan of Groucho and of course the Marx Brothers. So I interviewed him both for Freeze Frame and for Malcolm, but he didn't cut it. John Bennett Perry, it came down to him. That's Matthew Perry's father. He was very good, very adept. He was a soap star, but Merrill just didn't like him, or the network, NBC, didn't like him. And again, it finally came down to Alex Trebek doing it. And so I met Alex, got along with him fine, very nice guy, good guy. And the problem with the show was Malcolm was not likable. Any game show, you got to like the host and you got to like everything else, but he was sarcastic and he would put down the contestants and he would put down Alex to the point, he'd say, remember, Alex, the name of the show is Malcolm, not Alex. That's supposed to be funny, but it's not. And I'm sure Alex didn't think it was funny either. But, a pilot only takes one day. So we made it through. And that was my first associate producer. It was Merrill Heater got executive producer credit. Art Alisi, who did the prizes and became a great friend of mine after that, got producer credit. I got associate producer credit. And that was my into Merrill Heater. So NBC immediately came back and said, we're not picking up Malcolm, but we will pick up Battlestars, which they had just canceled, okay, which was Alex's show. So they renamed that the New Battlestars, and in 1984, the new Battlestars debuted. What was Battlestars? Merrill was incredible he had sold the rights to Hollywood Squares and Gambit and High Rollers. But if you changed enough things in a game show, you could bring back the basic tenets of that show on another show. So Battlestars use the same kind of Hollywood Squares questions, but instead of having 9 squares, we had 6 triangles, okay? And the stars were in triangles instead of squares. Alex was the host instead of Peter Marshall, and it was the same setup. The stars had a choice. Now on Battlestars, which I think was a mistake, we gave the stars a choice of 2 answers. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now,
2 actual answers.
2 possible answers. One was a bluff answer. One was the real answer. Mm-hmm. Now on squares, you never saw that. Okay. Meaning on squares, Rosemary would do a joke answer and then she would give an answer. And we believed that she had come up with that herself, right or wrong. She was doing the best she could. Battlestars, on the other hand, now we, the audience, saw the 2 answers that the star had the choice of. They still had the joke, which was on a card. I'll get to that. But the 2 answers were up there. So now the audience sees the 2 answers. So if Eric Estrada answers the question, he's picking one of the 2, and the contestant gets to see it too. Mm-hmm. They agree or disagree. The problem, of course, being it makes a star look dumb, because now if you know the answer, well, you see that he picked the wrong answer. So that was a problem with Battlestars, for me at least. But Alex was very good. He didn't have the same relationships with the stars that Peter did, because Peter did a lot of dinner theater. Still, well, now he doesn't, but Peter was a star,
actor.
Yeah, actor and I mean dinner theater, more than dinner theater. Whereas Alex was always, his Canadian game shows, did game shows, was thrilled to be doing game shows, and did them very well. I don't have to tell you, but Alex is Alex, and so he did a terrific job and less theatrical than Peter. And that's not a put down to Peter at all. It was just Alex was about the game, and Alex would laugh, of course, at jokes and stuff, but he was great at moving the game along, and it did well. But we had a few flubs in it. I mean, I'll give you the best and the worst of Battlestars, because I know I got to move along here. Okay. The best of Battlestars for me was meeting and befriending stars that I had always grown up with. Debbie Reynolds, I knew again from the Debbie Reynolds studios when we were doing Malcolm, she would come by and she would give her 2 cents always on the host that I was. And so anyway, she knew me and she had broken her toe. And so she would come early during lunch. During ESU, and I would hang out with her, and she became my second mom. I would complain to her about all my dating problems. Anyway, we became very good friends, and that was terrific. Rodney McDowell as well. If you know Rodney McDowell from Planet of the Apes, he was, but again, in the 40s, he was a big star. Roddy got shingles, and shingles is a very, very painful illness. And he had shingles on his face, and we had to put makeup on him. And what a trooper. He made it through the show with shingles. I said, Roddy, I don't know how you could do it. What a great guy. So again, meeting a lot of my favorite stars on that show without being starstruck, that was the best part of the show. The worst part of the show was the uncontrollable nature of some of the stars. Jay Reddick, who I've not mentioned, Jay was producer of the show. Once again, I got associate producer credit, and Jay had produced the original Hollywood Squares with Peter Marshall. But Jay was busy. Jay was doing a lot of stuff for Jay, and he was doing Battlestars as well. And so I'd be briefing the celebrities and the contestants, and likewise Jay would be briefing other celebrities. We'd have to split them up. And this one day, it was the worst day on the show. Leslie Nielsen came on the show, and Howie Mandel. And the problem was somebody had a farting machine, okay? And I thought Howie Mandel, who immediately hooked up with Leslie to become kind of friends, I thought Howie had given Leslie this little farting machine. And needless to say, moving ahead, the show starts, and in the middle of questions, all of a sudden, with all these farts, Merrill comes over to me, not Jay. Said, David, you got to go. I said, I don't know who's doing it. I assumed it was Howie. Turns out later on, make the story, it was Leslie Nielsen that had handed it off to Howie. Leslie was the practical joker, and Leslie wouldn't stop. So in sweetening, which is when you add applause and music after the show is over, we had to cover that entire show with coughs over every fart sound. It was the most coughing on any half-hour episode ever. But that was my first celebrity show, Battlestars. I'm just trying to get through it quickly so we can move on. So that was great. Merrill was one of the nicest people I've ever met. He was married to Elaine Stewart, who was a model on one of his shows. And again, just a nice, lovely lady. And luckily I was able to work with Merrill for years to come.